Hey, it's Tay. I play with clay, and today, I'm going to teach you how to make Strata-Cut textures. If you're new to Taymations and don't know what Strata-Cut Animation is, check out this video which dives further into this stop-motion technique. If you're returning to Tay, well, hello again. I love you. Before jumping into these textures, I highly recommend watching my Strata-Cut tutorial for beginners that goes over the fundamentals of slicing and animating your first time loaf. In this video, I'll assume you've already watched that and want to move on to more advanced time loafs. This will be a two-part video with 5 textures each because I don't want this thing to be 30 minutes long. Nobody wants a 30-minute Taymations video.
I do.
Thanks, Dad.
Good job, son.
The 5 textures in this video will be ordered by difficulty, which is a trend I'll continue into part 2. So feel free to stop after part 1 and practice these first 5 textures before moving on. Now on to the textures! Clay time! The mix pattern. This first texture is the easiest of them all. This is where most people start because it doesn't require any special techniques. To make the mix pattern, you'll need 2 to 4 colors of plastilina clay and your hands. That's it. Take each color and form them into balls. Work the balls together with your fingers and really force the colors to mix. Every once in a while, press it back into a ball to see how it's looking. Just be careful not to mix it too much or the swirls and lines inside will muddle together. Once you're happy with the way it's looking, form it into a rectangular shape to make it easier to slice. This texture gives you unpredictable flowing swirls and lines and also makes good filler when building bigger loaves with multiple textures.
Bonus tip.
You can actually mix together old slices from previous loaves to make the mix pattern. Exploding lines. This is one of my favorite textures, and it's not difficult at all to build. You'll need at least 2 colors for this, but I like using 4 or 5 to make it more interesting. You'll also need a pasta machine or hand roller, plastic wrap, and something hard that's shaped like a half sphere. You can find something around your house or easily make it yourself by rolling oven-baked clay into a sphere, cutting it in half, and baking it. Now you have 2 perfect half spheres. Roll all of your colors into sheets using the thickest setting on your pasta machine, or about 1/8 inch thick sheets if hand rolled. Take a small piece of plastic wrap and put it over your half sphere. Now lay your first sheet over it and press so it's formed against it. Lay the next sheet over this and continue these steps, alternating colors each time. Cut the corners of the sheets off around the shape of the half sphere. It should look like this when you're done. Remove the half sphere and fill in the gap it made with clay. This is a great place to use the mix pattern clay you made in the previous texture.
Bonus tip.
This texture is great for the front of bigger loaves and makes for an intense, colorful opening to an animation. Exploding tubes. This texture is similar to exploding lines in the way it's built and pairs well with exploding lines in bigger, multi-texture loaves. For this texture, you'll need at least 2 colors of clay, but I recommend 4 or more for the coolest effect. You'll also need your good old pasta machine, your half sphere shape, and some plastic wrap. Split every color into 2 piles. With one of the piles of each color, roll out snakes. I prefer to make them about the width of my pinky finger. Of course, we have different fingers and I don't know how big your pinkies are, so just roll them out to a thickness you like. It's really not that serious. Set your snakes aside and start rolling out the remaining piles through your pasta machine. I usually use the number 2 setting on this step, around 1/16 of an inch. Cut the edges of the sheets to make rectangles, balling up the scraps and setting them aside. Now, with a contrasting color, lay a snake out at the edge of the sheet. Cut the extra snakeage off at either side. Roll the snake in the sheet until it's just fully rolled up, like a cute little pig in a blanket, and cut the excess sheet off. Smooth out the seam. You should now have a tube of clay with 2 colors. Repeat this process with all of your snakes and sheets, rolling out the scrap clay into more snakes and sheets to use as much of it up as possible. I like to end up with 12 to 15 tubies in total. Lay some plastic wrap over your half sphere and start laying your tubies over it. Press them flush against the shape, alternating colors until you've covered the whole thing. Now, lay a second layer of tubies in the opposing direction. You can make as many layers as will fit with the number of tubies you have. Cut the excess tubey snake bits off from the edges. Remove the half sphere and fill in the gap it made with clay. Again, the mix pattern clay you made earlier works great here. I like to wrap the whole thing in a sheet of clay so it's like a little present waiting to be opened.
Bonus tip.
The reason I mentioned exploding tubes pairs well with exploding lines is because the exploding tubes are in the shape of the half sphere it was made on. You can build exploding lines on top in the same way you did in the exploding lines build. This is a great step toward a multi-texture loaf. Tiger stripes, yeah. I coined this texture tiger stripes because, well, it kind of looks like tiger stripes. This is another fairly easy one with a nice payoff. You'll need 2 or more colors of clay. I usually keep mine around 4 to 5 colors in total to avoid it becoming too much. You'll need a hand roller, a blade, and a pasta machine. Roll several sheets of one color on the thickest setting of your pasta machine. I like using white on this step because I feel like it makes the colored stripes pop. Cut the sheets into rectangles that are all the same size. It's best to have at least 7 or 8 sheets on this step. Stack all but one to the side. Rip off small pieces of the other colors and lay them around on top of the first sheet. Vary the shapes of the pieces so they're not all uniform. Now place a sheet on top. Repeat this process until you've gone through all of the sheets you have and ending with a white sheet so none of the colors are exposed. Now, take your hand roller and roll the whole thing, flattening the colored pieces inside. Roll until it looks something like this. I like to slice the edges off at this point so the overall shape is more uniform.
That was easy, right?
Well, the reason it's number 4 on this list is the way it's animated.
Hold on to your butts.
This shape should face the camera at 45 degrees side to side and also propped up at a 45-degree angle. This is what we call a double 45, which is a term you'll hear again in these tutorials. To do this, you'll need to prop it up with clay. This is another great place to use your mix pattern clay from the previous texture, or if you want the focus to be on the tiger stripe pattern, use darker clay to make it stand out.
Bonus tip.
There's a technique called reboxing that allows you to reform a double 45 texture into a loaf that can be sliced at a straight angle to the camera. This prevents the need for propping up the loaf and makes it easier to build these textures into multi-texture loaves. It's an advanced technique that will be shown in part 2 of this video, so stay tuned. Twisted crabs, yeah. This is a big bang for your buck texture because it's fairly easy to build and super satisfying to animate. You'll need 3 or more colors for this one. I'm using 3 colors that will be repeated. You'll also need a blade and your pasta machine. Roll each color into sheets. You can use whatever thickness you want, just know if you go too thin, the details may get lost in the mix. Cut the sheets into rectangles and lay them on top of each other, alternating colors. I'm doing 3 layers. Slice this block into thick strips like this. Now, twist each strip all the way through its length until it looks something like this. Once you have all the strips twisted, stack them on top of each other like so. This is another texture that needs to be sliced at a double 45. Use clay to prop it up from the back, and be sure that any sections jutting out into the air have clay supporting them. If they're not supported from beneath, it will be impossible to slice this part of the loaf because they would just fall down.
Bonus tip.
Believe in yourself. Just look at how far you've made it. You're amazing. Like any art form, there are no rules. Use these textures as starting points and change them, invent new ways of building them, or mixing them together. This was part 1 of the 10 Strata-Cut textures for beginners tutorial. In part 2, we'll go through 5 more textures that are more advanced than these ones to sharpen your slicing skills even further. I'm thinking about moving on to shapes after that one, or maybe faces, but let me know what you'd rather see in the comments. Hit the like button and subscribe to Taymations for more easy to follow stop motion tutorials. And as always, eat, sleep,